Hi everyone, today we're going to be taking a look at number 44 in your lesson book. That's on page 15. And for the last couple of weeks we've been working really hard on number 43, Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. And remember, that is still part of your homework this week. I want everyone to take another week to practice that, become very confident with those notes so you can play all the way through without having any pauses. And like I said last time, many students, if they devote some time to learning that melody, will end up memorizing it because it's so repetitive and it's just something that kind of gets falls under your fingertips pretty easily once you work on it a few times. So I just want everyone to be really, really confident with Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. So that is part of your homework. We're just not going over it today. But if we take a look at number 44, Matthew's March, this one is definitely, I think, a little bit more of a challenge than Twinkle Twinkle. One, because it's not a melody we know, so we have to work through it and kind of get it in our ear before we can play it with confidence. But there are a lot of jumps and skips, and this uses all of the notes in the D major scale, so you really have to be confident in reading all of those notes. But before we start reading our notes, there is something new on number 44 that some students picked up on, some didn't quite pick up on it yet, but we're going to talk about it right now. And that is something called a key signature. So if you look in the yellow box right above Matthew's March, you'll see what is called a key signature, and it says D major. So depending on what instrument you play, your clef is going to be on the very left side of that staff. Remember, every instrument has a clef that's unique to them. And then to the right of your clef, you'll see two sharp symbols, and that is the key signature. So what a key signature does is it tells you which notes in the melody or in the piece, because it could be for an entire piece of music, which of those notes you're supposed to play sharp or which notes you're supposed to play flat. That's something we'll get to later this year. But in this case, we see that there are two sharps, and those sharps are F sharp and C sharp, which is good because those are the notes that we've been playing sharp all along. Now you might be wondering what happens if there's only one sharp, or what if there's three, or what if there aren't any. Those are all things we'll talk about later, but for right now, all I need you to know, and it's actually written in Matthew's March on the first measure, there's this little yellow arrow, and it says play F's and C's sharp when you see this key signature. So even though it's not marked next to every note, it's marked at the beginning. It actually saves ink and makes the music look a little bit neater to do it like that. And you know, as a musician, because the key signature says F's and C's are sharp at the beginning, you play them all sharp throughout the whole tune. So with that, let's get into playing. We broke this up into the two lines. We did the top line and then the bottom line. We're going to do the same thing right now. And in the top line, we actually split it in half. We read the first two measures and then the second two measures because they are similar but not the same. I'm going to go through, and I would encourage you to do this with me at home and read the first 7 notes. Those notes are Heidi, Heidi, C sharp, C sharp, Heidi, Heidi, A. So those notes, you can think about how you on your instrument play high D and C sharp, but you're just going back and forth between those two notes and then playing open A. Unless you're a bass, then you have one finger A. Bass, you have it a little bit tougher because you have a shift, but for everyone else, this should be not bad at all. It's just on the A string. So go ahead and set your fingers down for high D, and we're going to play the first 7 notes. So ready, and here we go. Okay, hopefully that wasn't too challenging. I noticed in lessons almost everyone got that right away. So other than the shift for the bass, it's not too bad. Let's take a look at the next 2 measures. They start the same, and then the ending is different. So read with me the notes. Here we go. Heidi, Heidi, C sharp, C sharp, Heidi, B, A. So that last measure is the one that is different. Heidi, B, A. And this did throw some people off because there is a note in between high D and B, and that note is C sharp. And we often like to play like we're playing a scale. So like high D, and then C sharp and B. It's kind of weird to go from a D to a B, but that happens all the time, and so we have to get ready to be able to do that. So if you're having a hard time with not skipping, or with skipping the C sharp, something you can practice is just really slowly going D, B, A. And you might have to do it slowly like that a few times before you're able to do it comfortably in the with playing the top line. But here's the second half of the top line. I'm going to play it, and you can play it with me. Ready, high D, here we go. Okay, so two very similar parts on the two halves of the top line, just one note difference. Instead of a high D, it's a B on the second half. So here's the whole top line. 1, 2, here we go. Here's a high D again. Awesome. You've probably noticed that you've done this whole melody so far on one string. So violins, viola, cello, it's been on the A string, bass, it's been on the G string. I haven't had to change strings at all, which has been nice. Now we're about to change strings. So we're going to look at the second line, and we actually practice the second line in lessons one measure at a time, because each measure has something different, a different challenge to it. So the first measure on the second line, the notes are G, G, A, G. This is a bit challenging for everyone, actually, except bass. Bass, you finally get the easier part here. But for everyone who's not a bass, you have G on the D string, and then you have to cross over to A. So I would suggest either if you can keep your fingers down for G and do a finger tunnel and play the A without picking your fingers up, that would be very helpful. Some of you can't quite do that yet. Your fingers aren't long enough. So just very a small lift of your fingers. Don't lift them off like this. Just have your fingers down and then just hover them over the string so you know right where to put them back down. So here's G, G, A, G. It's going to sound like this. The next measure, F sharp, G, F sharp. Sounds like this. Next measure, E, E, A, E. Another string crossing in there. And the last measure, which we all agreed was the easiest measure of the melody, is D, D, D. So it might take a few tries for you to get this bottom line together, but I'm going to play the whole bottom line right now. If you have a hard time playing it with me, you can pause and just practice through that, because that is definitely the most challenging of the two lines, the bottom line. Okay, so I'm getting ready to play G. Here's the whole bottom line. 1, 2, here we go. So that's all the way through Matthew's March. I'm going to play the whole thing. Again, I don't expect it to be perfect right now because it's brand new. But I do expect you to take 3 or 4 days this week to work on it and get it as solid as you can. It might take you more than a week to get it perfect, but we should see some improvement from the first time we saw it to the next lesson. Remember, the only way you're going to get that is by practicing. Just putting your instrument in the corner and leaving it there for the week isn't going to get better. Just putting your music under your pillow, it's not going to get into your brain if you're sleeping on top of your music. So you really need to start putting in an effort to make sure that you can learn the music now that it's a little bit more challenging than it was when you first started. So here's all the way through Matthew's March. If you'd like to, you can play along with me. Here I go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Rest. right? So keep working hard on that, and we will keep working on it together at our next lesson.